At 2:46 in the afternoon, on an ordinary Tuesday in Japan, the seafloor moved. Not by inches, by feet. 60 miles of ocean floor lurched upward by as much as 30 feet in a matter of seconds. The water above it, billions of tons of the Pacific Ocean, was displaced instantly, violently, catastrophically. What happened next would be captured by more cameras, from more angles, with more clarity than any natural disaster in human history. The world watched it happen in real time, and still struggled to believe what it was seeing. But this is not only a story about Japan. This is the story of a wave that did not stop at Japan's coastline. That did not stop at any coastline. That crossed the entire Pacific Ocean, 5,000 miles, and arrived on American shores with enough force to kill, to destroy, and to serve as a warning that the world's most powerful ocean does not recognize borders. This is the story of the day the tsunami came to America. The Tohoku region of northeastern Japan had always lived in awareness of seismic danger. This was a culture that had built its entire modern infrastructure around earthquake preparedness. Japanese buildings were engineered to flex without breaking. Coastal seawalls, some of them 30 feet tall, had been constructed at enormous expense to protect low-lying towns. Evacuation drills were routine. The warning systems were among the most sophisticated in the world. Japan was, by any measure, the most tsunami-prepared nation on Earth. It was not enough. The Tohoku earthquake measured 9.1 on the moment magnitude scale, the fourth most powerful earthquake ever recorded in human history. Its epicenter was approximately 43 miles offshore, 15 miles beneath the Pacific seafloor. The rupture zone was extraordinary in scale, approximately 300 miles long and 150 miles wide. The entire northeastern coast of Japan experienced violent shaking that lasted between 4 and 6 minutes. In the cities, buildings swayed. Elevated highways rippled like ribbons. In offices and homes, people dove under desks, gripped door frames, held their children. In Tokyo, 230 miles from the epicenter, skyscrapers moved visibly. One of the tallest buildings in the city swayed nearly 20 feet at its apex. People inside watched the horizon tilt back and forth like a metronome. And on the coast, the water began to recede. The seawalls had been built for a specific threat level. Engineers had calculated maximum probable wave heights based on historical data. The tallest walls, in places like Kamaishi, had taken 12 years and billions of yen to construct. They were 40 feet tall, 60 feet in some sections. The first wave that arrived was 46 feet tall, and behind it, more were coming. The footage that exists from March 11, 2011 is unlike anything ever recorded of a natural disaster. Security cameras, personal phones, news helicopters, dashboard cameras, all of them captured different moments of the same catastrophe. And yet watching all of them together still cannot convey what it actually was. The wave did not arrive as a breaking surf. It arrived as a surge, a wall of dark water, thick with debris, that simply kept rising. That did not stop. That climbed over the seawalls, over the rooftops, over the hillsides. That picked up houses, cars, ships, trucks, trees, everything that humans had built, and moved it inland. In the coastal city of Tsunami, oil storage tanks were breached. The water ignited. Rescue helicopters photographed a city on fire, surrounded by ocean, the fire spreading across the surface of the flood. People trapped on rooftops watched the burning water rise toward them. Rikuzentakata was a city of 23,000 people, a seawall, evacuation plans, a prepared population. The wave was nearly 50 feet tall. When it receded, the city had almost entirely ceased to exist. 3,000 people lost their lives there alone. A single pine tree survived. One tree in a forest of 70,000 that had stood along the beach for centuries. The city preserved it, called it the miracle pine. It became the symbol of everything that had been lost and everything that remained. The wave that reached the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant was between 46 and 49 feet tall. The plant's seawall had been designed to withstand a 19-foot wave. the wave overtopped it with 20 feet to spare, flooding the backup generators that were meant to keep the reactor cooling systems operational. 3 reactors melted down. The nuclear disaster that followed would displace 150,000 people and contaminate a 12-mile exclusion zone that remains partially closed more than a decade later. When the water finally stopped moving, 15,899 people were dead. 2,529 were missing and never found. Over 1 million buildings were damaged or destroyed. The economic damage exceeded $360 billion, the costliest natural disaster in human history. But the wave was not finished. It had only just begun its journey. When the NOAA Pacific Tsunami Warning Center registered the earthquake, the alert went out within 3 minutes. Across the Pacific, coastlines were notified. Hawaii, the Aleutians, the US West Coast, Canada, Chile, New Zealand, Australia. Every Pacific nation received a warning. The physics of what was happening were extraordinary. The tsunami was not a single wave, but a series of waves, a wave train, spreading outward from the rupture zone in all directions simultaneously, like the rings from a stone dropped in a pond, but each ring carrying enough energy to overtop seawalls, lift vessels, and kill without warning. In open ocean, the waves were less than 3 feet tall, invisible from the deck of a ship, undetectable without instruments. But those instruments, the network of dart buoys, the deep ocean pressure sensors that NOAA had deployed across the Pacific after the 2004 Indian Ocean disaster, they were detecting it, tracking it, measuring it, giving the western shores of the Pacific Basin something that Japan, in the earthquake's first terrible minutes, had not had enough of: time. Hawaii had approximately 7 hours. The US West Coast had between 8 and 12 hours, depending on location. Evacuation orders were issued. Harbors were cleared. Low-lying coastal areas were evacuated. Emergency managers who had spent careers preparing for exactly this scenario were now implementing plans they hoped would never be needed. Hawaii was the first major American landmass in the wave's path. The warning system worked. The evacuation was largely successful. Coastal zones were cleared. The waves that arrived were significant. The largest measured nearly 8 feet at some locations. But the combination of early warning, public compliance, and Hawaii's geography limited the damage to property rather than lives. The harbor at Kahului on Maui was heavily damaged. Boats were tossed onto shore. A marina in Kauai sustained severe destruction. But no one in Hawaii died from the 2011 tsunami. It was, by the grim metrics of disaster science, a success story. Crescent City again, the same harbor whose geography had amplified the 1964 Alaska tsunami.
Airport, the Anchorage International, was closed down because the control tower had collapsed and killed the operator.
And we went out separately, mostly separately, to look at different things so we could cover 3 times as much.
To devastating effect. 47 years later, the same geometry was doing the same thing. The evacuation had been ordered. Most residents complied. But in the harbor, a group of people had gathered on the docks to watch, to see the waves come in, to experience something they expected to be dramatic but survivable, a show put on by nature. The surge that arrived at 7:26 a.m. was not the giant wave they imagined. It was a rapid, violent rush of water through the harbor entrance, channeled and accelerated by the bay's topography. It moved at extraordinary speed. Boats were wrenched from their moorings and hurled into each other. The harbor infrastructure, docks, ramps, walkways, was destroyed. Over $10 million in damage in one of California's smallest cities. One man was swept out to sea. His name was Dustin Weber, 25 years old. He was standing on a rock formation near the harbor, watching. The surge reached him. He was swept into the churning water. His body was found days later, miles offshore. He was the only person on the US mainland killed by the 2011 Japan tsunami. One life, 5,000 miles from the earthquake, more than 17 hours after the rupture. The wave had crossed an entire ocean and still had enough energy to kill. Santa Cruz, California. In Santa Cruz, the damage to the harbor was catastrophic. Dozens of boats were damaged or sunk. The harbor sustained over $26 million in damage. The surge moved through the harbor entrance repeatedly, wave trains arriving for hours after the initial surge, each one churning the harbor into chaos. A marine biologist named Gary Griggs had been studying California's coastal geology for decades. Standing on a cliff above Santa Cruz Harbor that morning, watching the surges move through, he later described a feeling of profound humility, of being reminded that the Pacific Ocean is not a passive backdrop to human civilization. It is an active, dynamic, incomprehensibly powerful system, and the energy stored within it, released in a single catastrophic moment on the other side of the world, could reach any shore it chose. Oregon and Washington. Along the Oregon and Washington coasts, surges of 3 to 7 feet struck harbors and estuaries. Several harbors sustained damage. Boats were destroyed. Roads were flooded. Evacuations were conducted successfully in the most vulnerable areas. But in the days that followed, scientists studying the wave data made a disturbing observation. The waves that had struck the Pacific Northwest were a preview, a relatively modest preview, of what a locally generated tsunami would look like. Because the Pacific Northwest sits directly above its own megathrust fault, the Cascadia subduction zone, where the Juan de Fuca plate grinds beneath the North American plate, where the pressure has been building since the last great rupture in January 1700, when a magnitude 9.0 earthquake sent a tsunami across the Pacific that devastated Japanese fishing villages and erased dozens of Native American coastal settlements in a single night. The Cascadia fault is overdue. The scientists say so openly. The question is only when. The 2011 Japan tsunami triggered a global reassessment of coastal risk. Nations around the Pacific examined their seawalls, their warning systems, their evacuation plans, and found them wanting. In the United States, FEMA and NOAA conducted comprehensive reviews of tsunami preparedness along the Pacific coast. What they found was sobering. Large sections of the coastline, including major population centers, had inadequate evacuation routes, insufficient vertical evacuation structures, and populations with limited awareness of tsunami risk. The Oregon coast alone has more than 300,000 people living in tsunami inundation zones. New research into the Cascadia fault was accelerated. Scientists used the 2011 event as a model, studying how a Cascadia rupture might differ from the Japan earthquake, how the locally generated tsunami might behave differently from a transoceanic one, how the minutes between rupture and wave arrival, perhaps 15 to 30 minutes on some Oregon beaches, compared to the hours of warning that West Coast communities had received on March 11, 2011. The conclusion was stark. A Cascadia rupture would give coastal Oregon and Washington almost no time at all. Japan's extraordinary disaster also revealed something profound about the limits of engineering. The seawalls that had been built at such extraordinary cost had delayed the waves by minutes. In some cases, by seconds. They had not stopped them. Scientists and engineers began a difficult conversation. Was the goal of coastal infrastructure to stop a tsunami, an increasingly impossible task as sea levels rise and seismic energy is better understood, or to buy time, to create precious seconds and minutes in which people could run? The answer, increasingly, was the latter. And that answer required something that no amount of concrete could provide. It required that people actually run. Return to ocean footage, wide shot, the Pacific, vast and still. In the years since March 11, 2011, Japan has rebuilt with extraordinary speed, extraordinary investment, and the kind of collective determination that defines that culture. New seawalls, taller, stronger, more extensive than anything built before, now line large sections of the Tohoku coast. Towns were reconstructed on higher ground. New early warning systems were installed. New evacuation routes were designed. But something else was built too, something less visible. In every school along the Tohoku coast, in every community center, in every home where a survivor lives, a memory was installed. A living, breathing awareness. Not a textbook warning, not a sign on a wall. A deeply personal understanding of what the ocean is capable of. what it will do again. Older Japanese coastal communities have a word, tsunami tendenko. It means, when a tsunami is coming, run for your life. Don't wait for others. Don't go back for belongings. Don't look back at all. Run. Because if you run, you survive, and then you can find your family afterward. If you stop to help, you may both die. It is a brutal philosophy. It was born from brutal experience, and the communities that followed it on March 11, 2011, where the culture of tsunami tendenko was alive and practiced, had dramatically better survival rates than the ones where it was not. The Pacific is 65 million square miles of water, miles deep. It is restless. It has been restless for longer than humans have walked the earth. It will be restless long after we are gone. We don't control it. We don't stop it. We don't negotiate with it. We only prepare, and we run.